Hi, welcome back. And we discussed about the confidentiality in the last video. So identification, authentication, and then authorization. Finally, the encryption ensures confidentiality. Now, what is integrity? Integrity is the principle by which the information should be protected from intentional, unauthorized, or accidental changes. So as I told you, if the information is changed, it should be changed by the authorized user with authorized means, or authorized user using an unauthorized means, or an authorized user making a change is not acceptable at all. Okay, again, if when you look at the integrity, it falls into the line of identification, authentication, authorization. And instead of encryption, we pick up the hashing. Okay, encryption is actually an preventive control. It prevents the unauthorized user from looking at the critical data. But when it comes to hashing, it is not a preventive control, it's a detective control. Hashing will not prevent the modification of the message, whereas the hashing will help you to identify if the message has been tampered in the transit or message has been tampered in the media. Okay, in fact, when we are going to discuss about the chain of custody, the hash value that is actually generated when the evidence is collected at the crime scene. I'm speaking about the cyber crime. The evidence is collected and we'll calculate the hash value, and the hash value should be same as what has been collected at the crime scene until it has been delivered or provided at the court of law. Okay, so that proves the importance of the integrity in the cyber crime or cyber security. Now, integrity is of two types. One is called the system integrity, the other one is called the data integrity. As very obvious, system integrity means that the system should not be changed by an unauthorized user, and all this thing comes with the practice of clear-cut cyber security, not having a domain admin or a local admin access available with anybody, including IT, all the time. You should have a privileged account management tool to actually secure it, and you should have a post-implementation review or after incident resolution, which resulted in fetching the password for the privileged ID. Or if you want to use a jump server, somebody should do a peer review to ensure that the system is still on a secure state. Okay, so again, this comes down to the state transition model that we are going to discuss as a part of the security architecture and engineering. That's on the system integrity, and data integrity is what we had been discussing all about, called the information integrity. Information should not be modified by an authorized user or authorized user in an unauthorized way. Availability, okay, availability is the availability of the data or the information is what we are going to speak about in CISSP, but availability of the building, availability of the supplier, availability of the human resources, availability of access to the building. Okay, all these things falls into the availability per se. For example, if you want to plan for availability of the IT infrastructure, availability for the civil infrastructure, availability of the human resource personnel, and availability of the supplier, and alternate route to enter your work area. Okay, and you are taking care of your the business continuity in a very large way. So the availability is a term that is a seed for the business continuity management and disaster recovery, and which is going to be a standard called ISO 22301. Okay, business continuity management system is what it's actually called as. These 5 things is something which I have picked up from a very popular book. I forgot the book name or the author's name. I will share it with you in the next video. And from the Amazon, you can actually buy it. It's a wonderful book for getting to know about the disaster recovery and business continuity management. So attacks on the availability comes from denial of service. Okay, DOS attack, denial of service, and if one entity is involved in causing a DOS, we call it as a denial of service. If there are multiple entities, we call that as a distributed denial of service. Okay, in fact, there is one of the videos in our channel on the HPing 3 that will demonstrate how do you actually do a DDoS. Okay, now if that is that easy, then obviously we need to have a security control to secure ourselves from the disaster with distributed denial of service attack. So we have got something as the DDoS protector, and we also have a network intrusion detection and prevention system that can actually help us in preventing those attacks and so to secure ourselves. Okay, this can be demonstrated. In fact, I used to demonstrate using the open source network intrusion prevention detection prevention system called SNOT. Okay, I will try to post a video on how do you launch and DDoS attack and how do you secure yourself, or how can you identify that, okay? So you can either bring up the SNOT and inline mode as an IPS or an IDS. IDS, we can have a look at the alert, and the IPS, it's going to prevent it for you, okay? So we can have a demo video on that. So denial of service or distributed denial of service is one of the attacks that is going to target your availability. And in fact, we have a term called PESTLE, political, economical, sociological, technological, legal, and environmental. We will be discussing about that in the DR and BCP as a part of this domain 1. Okay. Now, for now, denial of service is targeting the availability part of it. Lack of service due to the disaster, the natural calamity. So we cannot stop the natural calamity, but we can actually plan to be on a safer zone. Okay, if a particular area is prone for tornadoes or prone for tsunamis and prone for earthquakes or fire accidents, we actually don't choose that area, the location to build our data center, right? But sometimes what happens is we would have done a clear check, look at the historical perspective. Somebody would say, last 100 years, okay, nothing has happened in this particular area, but again, this will happen on the 101st year. Okay, it might sound like a Murphy's law, but it's always better to have a plan B in place. Okay, so natural calamity is something that cannot be prevented. It has to be a corrective and a reactive action. Okay, so BCP is actually that. Okay, disaster recovery is to build up from the disaster, and BCP is to ensure that your business is still continuing to operate to serve the customers. Okay, so denial of service and the lack of service due to a disaster are two threats for the availability. Opposing concepts: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We have disclosure, alteration, destruction. Okay, as an opposing concepts for the CIA. Okay, that does not like the CIA. IEEE, identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. Yesterday we discussed about identification attacks, spoofing, masquerading, impersonation, and one of the types of man in the middle. Authentication can actually be broken by brute force attack, hybrid attack, dictionary attack, fake login screens, sniffing attacks, okay, or replay attacks. Okay, if the password is not converted to a hash value with a timestamp, this is something that we discussed in a cryptography video series. Yeah, if the password is converted to a hash value without a timestamp, I can do a replay attack on the password. Authorization is actually the permissions. So if the guy is going to spoof his identity and then break his authentication, okay, then he can do what is called as a sweep, okay, for the authorization. Now, what is a sweep? There are two types of sweeps. When it comes to information security, we have horizontal authorization sweep, and then not a sweep, sorry, it's a creep. It's a creep, basically, okay? Horizontal authorization creep and then vertical authorization creep. Now, what is a horizontal authorization creep? For example, I join organization as a system operator, okay? I join organization as a finance manager and or finance consultant. Then I do an SAP FICO as a training. Then I become a financial consultant for the SAP. So from the financial team or finance team, I have to move literally to an other work area from where I can do my consulting work. So my previous access to the finance room should be revoked when I'm out of the room. If that is not happening, we call that as a horizontal authorization creep. Now, what is vertical authorization creep? I joined the organization system operator, then I become system administrator, senior system administrator, then a system architect. Okay, finally, I become a data center manager. Now, when I become a data center manager, the privileged access or the authority to request for the privileged access and the access to the data center should be revoked for me, because ideally I should be managing those incidents or changes or service requests with my team. Okay, if that is not revoked, it is called the vertical authorization creep. So horizontal is a lateral movement, and vertical is going to be a movement from bottom to top. And both the things can be, prevented if you're going to have a user verification testing, where you're going to have the list of users belonging to a particular department, and you are going to send the list to the corresponding managers, and then ask them to verify, do they still need an access to the data center or access to the server? Is this access actually okay? And are they really authorized to request for an password or privileged account on this server? Okay, all this thing is going to add on, okay, and add on to the benefits if you are doing a user verification testing periodically. Ideally, every month is what I would expect you to do. Whenever I say this on my class, they say, no, we cannot do it every month. We actually need to, we don't have manpower. Okay, but this cannot be an excuse. Security comes first. If you don't have manpower, request for it, or delegate it, automate it. Okay. Finally, the accountability. Accountability is an ownership for a particular action. Okay, excuse me. What is an ownership for a particular action? So accountability, as far as the RACI chart is actually concerned, okay, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Accountability cannot be delegated or it cannot be shared. Okay, there is only one accountable person for an entire activity or a project or a program, whatever it is. Responsibility could be with multiple people. Okay, so these are the other principles as a part of your security. Other terms, defense in depth, otherwise called the layered security. Now, layered security is implemented physically, it's also implemented technically. Okay, for example, you might have a DDoS protector, you might have your perimeter firewall, you'll have your web application firewall, you'll have one more firewall or network intrusion detection prevention system before the traffic actually enters your trusted network. So multiple layers of defense. This is called the defense in depth. So multiple layers of defense could also be of the same nature. It could be technical, or it could be a different nature also. For example, it could be a combination of physical security and your technical security or logical security. Now, physical security, if I am a system administrator, I have to display my ID card at the gate and display my ID card at the door at the ground floor. And I have to display my ID card, the card reader on the ground floor, enter the lift lobby, okay, get onto my particular floor or where the data center is. And I need to display my ID card to the data center door, also put my biometrics, then enter the data center, and I have to put my credentials, log on to the console and start doing it. But there are people who say the console need not have an lock in it. Okay, it's always open. But as an auditor, I beg to differ, because if that is the case, a Linux administrator can also log on to the Windows system if the console does not have the access control lock on the screen. Okay, so we cannot allow that thing to happen. So it should have locks. That means the guy, in my case, on my scenario, I walk onto the data center, so displaying my ID card and putting in my biometrics, get onto the console and put in the administrator user ID and password and start working on it. Okay, so there are multiple layers before I start logging onto the system. If for administrator, these type of controls are there, for the hackers, much more level of control should exist. Okay, this is what is the defense in depth. Least privileges. And subject should be assigned an authority to perform his or her activity and not more than that. Okay. Now, I will discuss these privileges in combo with need to know. What is need to know? What is the, why do we need to have an access to a particular system? Or why do we need to know this information? Okay, is what need to know is. If you look at from the SDLC perspective, we have testers, we have developers, and we have users. The developers will have access to the development environment. They will have read, write, and execute access, because they have to also do what is called the unit testing. I'm speaking about the traditional SDLC. Moment the development activity is done, and they have to promote it to the integrated unit testing. Okay, so where the testers will start testing their particular module. So testers will know the IP address only of the test system, and they will have only the execute access to the executable. Okay, they will not have and read, write access to the source code. Okay, the testing environment might have source code or might not have source code. Okay, but ideally it should not have source code, because there's no necessity for the testing and the production environment to have a source code in it. No. Okay, so testers need not know the IP address of the development system, and testers need not know the IP address of the production system as well. Okay, but not knowing the IP address of the production system is a very rarest thing that will actually happen. But the testers should know the IP address of the test system, and they should have only the execute access. That's the least privilege. Okay, no read and no write, only execute. Similarly, if you look at the users, okay, they will have only the execute access to the exe or a binary, whatever it is. But for the data, they might have a change or modify access to it. Okay, or read, write also to the data. when it comes to the application program, okay, exe or binary, whatever it is, they will have only an execute access. The user will not know or should not know the IP address of the test system and the development system. Ideally, they are on. We'll be discussing about certain ISO standards when we discuss about the domain 3, wherein there is a domain segregation is actually what is recommended. Okay, so we'll discuss that. Ideally, the users will be on a separate VLAN, and the production system will be on a separate VLAN for the users. Development system on a separate VLAN. Test system will be on a separate VLAN. Okay, so the movement is actually triggered by a change request impacting the configuration management. Okay, this one the least privileges need to know, and ideally, none of the employees in the organization need not know where the data center is. Okay, and when you look at the need to know for the access to data center or least privileges as an access data center, none of the professionals in the organization, including the IT team, will have access to data center all the time. Okay, if you want to enter the data center, it should be based on a service request. And the service request should be substantiated with a priority incident where it requires the tangible operations to be done from the data center, and the change to be implemented that requires a tangible operations, or service request fulfillment. So if the activity can be done without entering the data center, that's what is actually required. If an activity requires an access data center to perform a tangible operation or upgrade a server or upgrade a power or something like this, it's only then you can request an access to data center. That's one of the least privileges. Segregation of duty is like a maker-checker model where a requester cannot be the approver. Okay, and assume that I'm a project manager. My team is actually requesting for a leave. Okay, and I'm approving the leave. Because I'm approving a leave, it doesn't mean that I can approve my own leave. Right? It's a segregation of duty. We'll discuss a lot about the segregation of duty when we discuss about the Brewer-Nash model, Chinese wall model, as a part of the security architecture. Dual control. Two people have to join together, okay, come together to initiate a transaction. In a way, is a segregation of duty. In segregation of duty is to manage the conflict of interest. Dual control might not be only for conflict of interest. Okay, for example, a bank locker. Okay, bank locker will have a key with the customer and the bank manager. Okay, they both have to come together to open the locker. The interest is same. Okay, even the bank manager wants to allow the customer to look at the articles or the items in the locker, and the customer also wants to do the same. So dual control might not always be the segregation of duty. No. Okay, coming on to the split knowledge. Okay, so I'll tell you something. I was actually working for a bank in 2002, and we had an application called Global Password Management System. It's a privileged account manager, and it's a password manager basically. So whenever there is a priority incident which requires a privileged account password to be used, the requester will get the password, and once the incident has been closed or change has been implemented, one person from Chennai, India, will put in the let's say the password length is 10 characters. 5 characters will be entered by the guy in Chennai. The other 5 characters will be entered by the guy in Kuala Lumpur. So we don't know whose 5 character is first, and they mutually do not know each other. That's the split knowledge. Split knowledge is also used in cryptography, wherein there's a private and public key pair, and we discuss about this in the cryptography video series basically. So public and private, key pair for a particular user. I'll divide that into 2 parts and give one half to company A, the other half to the company B. Okay, the company A and B are called as the key escrow services. In case the private or the public key is actually lost that belongs to the user, the management will discuss. Okay, and they will initiate a request to restore both the halves, and he can get his private and public key back. He would have lost his public key or private key. Okay, restoration will help them to recover. This is also called as a split knowledge. Okay, it's called the key splitting. Okay, so this organization A and the organization B, they do not mutually know each other. Yeah. So due care and due diligence. Okay, due diligence is to ensure that you are actually doing a gap analysis. Okay, and okay, I'm doing a gap analysis to see if the organization has got all the requirements to meet for, let's say, ISO 27001. Okay, if not, then I will take a due care to put in the control there. Even after I do a due care to put in the control there, I'll still do due diligence to see if the control is working or not. Okay. Now I'm doing a due diligence. I see the organization does not have a firewall. Okay, then I take a due care. Okay, I put in the firewall there. Once the firewall is put in, I have to do a firewall rule review periodically. Okay, that is actually called as a due diligence. Okay, so due care and due diligence is something which is not a one-time activity, but a continuous activity. The VAPT, the internal audit, okay, all these things are a part of due care and due diligence. In case you don't take the necessary step to put in the control and you don't bother to see the control works or not, having an antivirus is good, but you should always ensure that the antivirus has got up-to-date signatures in it. That's a due diligence. Okay, if you don't do it, it's actually called as a gross negligence. There are a lot of laws in the world which demands you to report a security incident within 24 hours, 72 hours, etc. In case the investigators look at your environment, if you don't have the due care, due diligence, daily, weekly, fortnightly, monthly, quarterly, half yearly, annual dashboards for security, that includes your business as usual and the projects, that means you have gross negligence. You might face a penalty. So it's always better to be very serious on security, because security is something which you will, it's like a term insurance, okay? It might not give you a benefit immediately. Okay, term insurance gives you a death benefit, okay? You want to ask, if somebody's going to ask me, we have never faced this problem so far, and I don't need this control in place. The next person I ask, do you have term insurance? If they say yes, next person, have you ever died? No. Then why do you want to have it? It's a term insurance. Security is exactly that, okay? I'm trying to secure you. If you don't want it, you're going to die. That's it. Okay, after that, there's no point in having security. So due care, due diligence are very, very, very important as far as security is concerned. Okay, be serious on security so that your complete investment, okay, is going to be readily available and fruitful for you. Okay, and we are going to learn about return on security investment, ROSI, in this particular domain. Okay, stay connected with me for further videos on CISSP and further videos on important happenings that happen in the cybersecurity world across the globe. Okay, cybersecurity world across the globe, both mean the same. Okay, so all the best for joining me for this particular video, and thanks for watching. Subscribe to this particular channel to stay connected, and happy learning, and all the best to you all. Cheers, bye-bye.